The local supercluster is the structure of galaxies our Milky Way belongs to. Astronomers have only known of it for a century, and they have since identified an even larger structure surrounding it. Our Sun is one of many billions of stars gathered into a single enormous structure, a galaxy. We call ours the Milky Way. It sits inside a small cluster of nearby galaxies that astronomers call the local group, and the local group in turn sits inside something much larger. The local supercluster contains the local group as one of its many constituents. It is thought to be home to tens of thousands of galaxies, with the brightest organized into clusters and groups. Our Milky Way is one of them. For most of human history, the Earth was thought to be at the center of everything. Copernicus and Newton each undid part of that picture over the 4 centuries that followed, until the geometry of the night sky was reorganized around the Sun, and eventually around nothing in particular at all. 100 years ago, that reorganization took its largest leap. In 1923, Edwin Hubble used the new 200-centimeter telescope at Mount Wilson in California to measure the distance to a faint smudge in the constellation Andromeda. He found that the smudge lay 2.5 million light-years from Earth, far outside the Milky Way and a separate galaxy in its own right. In a single night, the size of the known universe multiplied 100,000-fold. The Virgo cluster sits at the heart of the local supercluster, about 55 million light-years from Earth. A light-year is the distance light travels in a single year, roughly 9.5 trillion kilometers. The figure of 55 million light-years describes a distance the human mind struggles to hold. The scale matters more than the number. Our galaxy, with its several hundred billion stars, is one resident of this structure, sitting somewhere in the supercluster's outer regions. The supercluster's second name, the Virgo supercluster, comes from the patch of sky where its central cluster lies. That cluster sits in the direction of the constellation Virgo, one of the oldest named figures in the night sky. An outstretched palm held against that part of the heavens covers the position of many hundreds of galaxies belonging to the supercluster. A good telescope reveals them as soft smudges of light, each one a gathering of 100 billion suns. Most sit at distances beyond unaided sight. The Virgo cluster itself contains around 1,300 catalogued galaxies. A striking feature within the cluster is Markarian's chain, a curve of galaxies that includes M84, M86, NGC 4477, NGC 4473, and several others. The chain takes its name from the Soviet astronomer Benjamin Markarian, who in the 1960s observed that at least 7 of its galaxies share a coherent motion through space. A separate prominent galaxy nearby in the Virgo cluster is M87. It is a giant elliptical galaxy with several times the stellar mass of the Milky Way and a surrounding dark matter halo extending many times further again. In April 2019, an international collaboration of radio telescopes, working together as a single Earth-sized instrument, produced the first direct image of a black hole. That black hole, 6.5 billion times the mass of our Sun, sits at the center of M87. The heart of the local supercluster is, in other words, a place whose central region has already been imaged. Recent mapping has shown that the local supercluster is one component of a still larger structure. In 2014, R. Brent Tully and his collaborators Helene Courtois, Yehuda Hoffman, and Daniel Pommard mapped the motion of hundreds of thousands of galaxies around us and identified a basin of gravitational attraction that contains our supercluster and several others. They named it Laniakea, a Hawaiian word meaning immense heaven, proposed by Nauea Napoleon, an associate professor of Hawaiian language at Kapiolani Community College. When Voyager 1 passed beyond the orbit of Neptune in 1990, Carl Sagan persuaded NASA to turn the spacecraft's camera around and take one last photograph of Earth. The image showed Earth as a single pale blue pixel suspended in a sunbeam. Sagan wrote of it that everyone we know, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Seen at the scale of the local supercluster, that same mote of dust, sits inside a structure of tens of thousands of galaxies, themselves one component of a still larger arrangement. Our planet's address, by current understanding, reaches as far as the Local Supercluster, a structure of tens of thousands of galaxies in which our Milky Way is one resident among many.